We need to take action, and we will.
A promise from President Obama after alleged meddling by Russia in the U.S. presidential election. But Donald Trump is striking back. Path to peace. The Holy Father brings together Colombian leaders at odds over a deal with left-wing guerrillas. Crisis in Syria. We'll give you an update on innocent civilians still trapped in Aleppo. And Christmas preps. We'll take you inside an unusual warehouse supplying parishes with goods that serve the soul. On EWTN News Nightly for Friday, December 16th, 2016. Good evening from Washington, D.C., and thank you for joining us from around the world. I'm Wyatt Goolsby. President Barack Obama says he wants to send a clear message to Russia. Hacking of political websites in the United States won't be tolerated. He's still not saying what the U.S. response will be, but Obama says everyone should be concerned about cyber hacking. White House officials say it's a fact that Russian hacking helped Donald Trump's campaign against Hillary Clinton. And today, President Barack Obama doubled down during his year-end news conference.
Based on uniform intelligence assessments, the Russians were responsible for hacking the DNC. As a consequence, it is important for us to review all elements of that and make sure that we are preventing that kind of interference through cyber attacks in the future.
In an interview with NPR Radio, the outgoing president suggests Russia's leader, Vladimir Putin, was personally involved.
We need to take action, and we will, at a time and place of our own choosing.
Trump is mocking the White House response, asking on Twitter, are we talking about the same cyber attack where it was revealed that the head of the DNC illegally gave Hillary the questions to the debate? So far, there has been no persuasive evidence of Putin's role in the hackings, but despite that lack of proof, Democrats portray it as irrefutable.
There has been hacking by the Russians. We're clear on that. It goes up to the highest levels of the Russian government. We're clear on that.
Some Republicans are pushing back.
Some reports say that the intelligence community has come to a consensus that Russia wanted Mr. Trump to win. I'm just telling you that's not true, that there isn't a consensus on most of these things.
And the Senate Homeland Security Chairman Ron Johnson is blasting the CIA for refusing to provide a briefing on the issue of Russian hacking. Hillary Clinton is blaming Russian interference for her defeat. She's casting her failed campaign as part of a long-running effort by Vladimir Putin. Clinton is citing a personal beef with Putin as a possible reason for Russia to meddle in the race. Meanwhile, Russia says evacuations out of the besieged city of Aleppo, Syria, are complete. They claim that all women and children have left, but the United Nations and humanitarian groups say that's not true. International aid groups say there are still high numbers of Syrians in eastern Aleppo waiting to be evacuated. It comes one day after the Syrian government said it was suspending evacuations because a convoy in Aleppo was attacked by rebels. The Russian military also says some rebels have stayed behind and are firing on Syrian troops. Some of those fleeing Syria are on their way to neighboring Turkey. Turkey's foreign minister says his country is helping to broker the deal to take the wounded from the bombed-out areas. He estimates more than 7,000 civilians have been evacuated. Turkish state-run media is pointing the finger at Iran for flaring up hostilities in Aleppo. Now to other stories our EWTN News Nightly team is covering in today's world. Pope Francis brings Colombia's president and his main political opponent together to discuss the country's rebel peace deal. President Juan Manuel Santos had already been scheduled to meet with Pope Francis as part of a European tour after picking up this year's Nobel Peace Prize in Oslo. But the Vatican invited his predecessor, former President Alvaro Uribe. They gathered in the Pope's private study to discuss the peace accord that ends Latin America's longest-running conflict. Our producer, Mary Shevlin, joins us now from Rome. Mary, tell us about this meeting orchestrated by the Holy Father.
Wyatt, well, as you know, where politics or politicians close the door, it's sometimes Pope Francis that can open the window. And in fact, President Santos of Colombia was already in Europe picking up his Nobel Peace Prize in Oslo, and the two leaders were already set to meet Then the Vatican invited his predecessor, former President Uribe, to fly through the night to be here for today's meeting. And the three men sat down for 25 minutes in the Pope Francis's office for a private discussion about peace and how to move forward. We know this is a cause dear to Pope Francis's heart. He has been pushing for peace in Colombia since the beginning of his papacy. We'll see if he has any results. Both men, after the meeting, both the Colombian leaders saying that neither of them saw peace in the foreseeable future, but, hopefully.
So, Mary, remind us what the conflict in Colombia is all about.
Well, as we know, this has been a conflict that goes back to the mid-'60s, Wyatt, and it's basically a struggle between the FARC rebels and the right government, and they've been misappropriating land, taking land, kind of more a Marxist ideology, fighting against the more conservative political powers that be there. And they tried to broker a deal with the left-wing guerrillas. This is under President Santos. He wants to broker a deal. He wants to try to bring the peace. But the people on the right say, basically, you're exonerating them and for all of the cruelty and the terrorism that they've committed in the past. So it's a very touchy subject between two very divided political parties.
So what is Pope Francis' role in this, and why is he taking such an active one?
As we know, he's the first Latin American pope in the church's history, and so he knows these problems better than anyone. And we know he was instrumental, for example, in brokering some peace and openness between the United States and Cuba. So he has an interest in peace in general, but especially in Latin America, and he's been very vocal about that throughout his papacy. But as we mentioned before, after the meeting, neither the current president of Colombia or the former president said that anything would change in the near future, but they both were impressed and affected by meeting with Pope Francis. We'll see what sort of change may come from today's meeting.
Well, Mary, as you say, Pope Francis talks a lot about resolving conflict through discussion. It's nice to see him actually implementing that through action. Mary Shevlin joining us now from Rome. Thanks so much, Mary.
Thank you, Wyatt.
Venezuela became a country without cash today. The country's most widely used banknote went out of circulation, but the new banknotes have not yet arrived at banks or ATMs, leaving people without any valid currency. Venezuelans waited in long lines to deposit their old notes. People are relying on credit cards and bank transfers or avoiding making purchases altogether. Amid the currency chaos, the U.S. cautioned Americans against visiting the South American country. Donald Trump continues to build his team. The president-elect is tapping attorney David Freedman as ambassador to Israel. Freedman, an Orthodox Jew, supports Israeli settlements and other changes to U.S. policies in the region. Like his predecessors, Trump has also vowed to move the American embassy to Jerusalem. That would be a politically charged act that would anger Palestinians who want East Jerusalem as part of their territory. A Mississippi law aimed at protecting traditional marriage could be blocked again by a federal court. Groups in favor of redefining marriage are pushing for the court to continue to block the law, which lets businesses and government employees deny services based on religious beliefs. A U.S. district judge halted the law before it took effect this summer, calling it unconstitutional. The explosive investigation into Planned Parenthood continues. This week, a high-ranking Republican senator referred several Planned Parenthood affiliates to the FBI and the Department of Justice for investigation and possible prosecution. Jason Calvi has more from the Capitol tonight. Jason?
Wyatt, Senator Chuck Grassley, chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee, says the groups that may have broken the law include 4 Planned Parenthood affiliates and several of the middlemen providing fetal tissue to researchers. The recommendations are based on his committee's just finished investigation. It was launched right after the release of the first undercover video back in 2015, claiming to show Planned Parenthood and others illegally selling aborted baby parts.
$325 for a brain, $650 for 2 of the same baby's eyes, and $325 for a liver. These receipts show how much a company charged researchers for parts of a 20-week-old aborted baby they got at a Planned Parenthood clinic. It's part of a new report by the Republican staff of the Senate Judiciary Committee. U.S. law bans the sale of fetal tissue, but it allows reimbursement for expenses like transportation and storage. The report finds companies have charged thousands of dollars for specimens removed from a single aborted fetus. They have claimed the fees they were charged only recovered acceptable costs when they had not, in fact, conducted any analysis of their costs when setting the fees. But a Democratic senator on the Judiciary Committee tells me he's not buying it.
There is no credible evidence of wrongdoing. It appears to be part of a continuing assault on Planned Parenthood, which is no news.
This latest development was a surprise to one of the members of the House panel investigating Planned Parenthood.
Well, I didn't realize that the Senate was even doing the investigation, but it certainly mirrors the same thing that we have found over here in the House in our select panel on infant lives. And so I'm very glad to see that there has been now a collaboration with what he discovered in his investigation with what we have discovered also in our investigation here in the House.
The Center for Medical Progress, that's the group that helped bring this issue to the light with those undercover videos. They say the new report shows that Planned Parenthood and their partners must be prosecuted, while Planned Parenthood and the other groups say they did nothing against the law.
Well, Jason, now that Senator Grassley's referrals head to the FBI and the DOJ, what's next?
Well, a member of the House investigation of Planned Parenthood says it's a good thing that the investigation be handed over to the Department of Justice because that department has more investigative power and can actually bring charges forward. Wyatt?
Jason Calvi reporting from Capitol Hill. Thanks, Jason. The Obamas head to Hawaii for their final Christmas vacation as the first family. The trip will include work and play. On December 27th, President Obama will visit the Pearl Harbor Memorial with Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe. The Obamas return to Washington after the new year. And just a few days later, Donald Trump will take office. The billionaire businessman actively courted Catholic voters during the campaign. In a letter to CatholicVote.org, Trump promised to protect the rights of Catholics to live their faith, to serve their communities, and to act on their beliefs without fear. Joining us now to check and see if the president-elect is fulfilling that promise is Brian Bertsch, president of CatholicVote.org. Brian, that was a big promise to Catholic voters. How is the president-elect doing so far in living up to that promise?
Well, I think in these first few weeks, the biggest priority is going to be personnel. And on the issues that involve religious liberty, the rights of conscience, and the commitments that Donald Trump made to us, we are looking at the personnel that he is putting in key positions, including the Department of HHS and other places. And so far, we'd give him a grade A. He's put some fantastic people in places of authority that will be part of helping enact the agenda that we hope to see.
Have you been in contact with anyone on the Trump transition team? And if so, what have you discussed?
We've been in contact with certain people, not the highest levels, because I think they're trying to fill all sorts of positions, some of which don't involve a lot of the issues we are working on. We're also in contact with legislators on the Hill that are helping map the strategy for the legislative agenda once he does take office in January.
So what are the major Catholic issues you'll be monitoring as Trump takes office?
Well, we call them the big three. The first big three issues over the first 100 days that we expect action to happen are addressing the repeal and replacement of Obamacare, the nomination of a justice to replace the late Justice Scalia, and the question of federal funding for Planned Parenthood. All three of those issues we expect action on in the first 100 days, and those are our priorities right now.
Brian, it's one thing to elect a president who is going to advocate for a number of those issues. It's another thing to actually make sure that they're being held accountable. What is Catholic Vote going to do to advocate for those key issues?
I think the main thing we are doing, and the main thing I would tell Catholics, is to stay focused, not get distracted. You know, we have a number of things circling, whether it's accusations of racism or recounts or now the Russians, and those are, in our opinion, mere distractions in order to try to slow down the momentum and to throw up obstacles to the agenda. Stay focused on the issues, stay focused on the people that will be responsible for bringing about these changes, and to organize ourselves in a way to apply the pressure that's going to be needed to win these fights.
Are you confident a lot will get done in the first 100 days?
Very confident. We're seeing a lot of good signs. I think the stars are aligned, the prayers are being answered, and I think we need to keep praying, keep working hard, and stay focused.
Very good. Well, I know we'll be in touch within the next year. It's a big 2017. Brian Bertsch, president of CatholicVote.org. Thanks so much for talking with us.
Thank you.
Coming up, Facebook fights back against fake news. We'll tell you what steps the social media site is taking and how you can help. And politics dominated the headlines this year. We'll take a look back at the top stories. Our founder, Mother Angelica, makes a list of Catholics of the Year for 2016. It's released by the Catholic newspaper Our Sunday Visitor. Also on the list, St. Mother Teresa of Calcutta and Knights of Columbus Supreme Knight Carl Anderson, among others. The suspect in a shooting inside a Washington, D.C. pizzeria after reading a fake news story online pleads not guilty. Police say Edgar Welch fired multiple shots inside the restaurant on December 4th. Police say he surrendered after panicked customers and staff fled. And with the rise of fake news on the internet, Facebook is adding new measures to stop the spread of false stories. The social media site says it will partner with outside fact checkers and news organizations to stop the worst of the worst offenders. Facebook will make it easier for users to report fake news when they see it on their news feed. While the false stories won't be removed from Facebook, they will be flagged and shown up further down people's news feed. Media coverage of the White House could significantly change when President-elect Trump takes office. The press has been keeping an almost constant watch outside and inside of Trump Tower in New York, even though access to the president-elect has been very limited. Joining us now is Sarah Westwood, White House reporter for the Washington Examiner, who has been one of those reporters covering Trump Tower. Sarah, there has been a lot of grumbling on both media, mainstream media, and on the Trump side about mainstream media coverage of Donald Trump. You've been there, if you will, on the front lines. What has access been like?
I don't think there's any question that the media coverage of Donald Trump has been overwhelmingly negative, not just of his campaign, but also of the transition process that's constantly been characterized as being in chaos, as being a mess, even though that might not necessarily be the case. That being said, access to Donald Trump has been extremely limited. He hasn't held a press conference since he's been elected. It's been more than 100 days since he's had one. So the members of the media do have somewhat of a legitimate gripe with Donald Trump, given that he hasn't come forward to address questions. Instead of a regular press conference, the president-elect loves to tweet out all sorts of messages, sometimes completely off the cuff. As a reporter, how do you go about writing and creating stories when, like I said, some of these messages can come so randomly and at any random time? They do seem random, but there does seem to be a method to his madness when it comes to social media use. Donald Trump typically likes to tweet things out in the morning, and that sets the tone of coverage for the rest of the day. He's basically dictating what the news conversation is going to be. You saw that when he's tweeting about flag burning, when he's tweeting about the Boeing deal to build Air Force One, and we are forced to cover that because his social media generates so much interest among his supporters. That information isn't substantively different from what we'd receive from a press release, but it's just different in that it goes directly to the people and we're no longer a filter for that information. Well, Donald Trump certainly has been an unorthodox candidate. We can certainly expect changes in the way that the press will cover the White House when he's there. Some people have talked about possibly losing the daily briefing. Some, they said, more reliance on social media. What do you think needs to be changed, and what do you think needs to be kept in the way that reporters cover the White House? Well, certainly what needs to be kept is the daily briefing. I know there's been some discussions about maybe nixing that, but it's important because it gives journalists an opportunity to press the administration on its policies on a daily basis, and it gives them access to answers to their questions and has them all addressed in one place so you can make sure that those answers are addressed. But at the same time, all of this hand-wringing over potentially changing the seating chart in the White House briefing room doesn't make a ton of sense unless you're a journalist who sits on the front row and has an assigned seat. It does make sense to make the White House press corps more democratic, given that that's the way the media is now. There aren't just 3 networks. The media is very much more of a level playing field than a hierarchy like it used to be. So it's not necessary anymore necessarily for the same outlets to have prioritized access to the White House. Like you say, a changing media landscape and an unorthodox candidate. We'll see. It's going, like we said, it's going to be an interesting 2017. Sarah Westwood, White House reporter for the Washington Examiner. Thanks again for coming and being with us. Thank you. Politics in 2016 was dominated by the question of who would be the next president of the United States. But the current commander-in-chief made plenty of headlines of his own with the agenda for his final year in the White House. More than a dozen men and women began 2016 in the race to succeed President Obama.
And with his finish line in sight, the president started the year at a fast pace, starting with an issue that, to his dismay, has shaped his presidency.
Charleston, San Bernardino.
Gun control, part of a busy first 3 months, and then the nuclear deal with Iran, moves that ruffled Republicans, and the first visit by a sitting U.S. president to Cuba in almost 90 years. But President Obama couldn't anticipate everything.
Justice Antonin Nino Scalia was a larger-than-life president on the bench.
Antonin Scalia, the court's most vocal conservative, died in February at the age of 79. In March, the president nominated Merrick Garland to fill the vacancy. Just months from a presidential election, the Republican Senate majority was determined to block it.
It is the Senate's constitutional right to act as a check on a president.
One consequence of an even-numbered court, a 4-4 non-ruling in June that effectively blocked President Obama's executive orders on immigration. As the primary calendar wound down, so did the number of candidates.
Today was the day where we hit the 1237.
We are all standing under a glass ceiling.
The heated presidential campaign would pit a political insider versus a billionaire outsider.
Friends don't let friends vote for Trump.
She is the candidate of the past.
Ahead of their first debate in September.
She's got experience, that I agree, but it's bad experience.
Why won't he release his tax returns?
October brought surprises. For Donald Trump, a vulgar hot mic moment revealed, and multiple accusations of sexual misconduct, which he denied. For Hillary Clinton, the FBI director's announcement that the agency was giving emails on the private server she used while Secretary of State another look. But the real political stunner came in November.
The President-elect of the United States, Donald Trump.
An upset that left Clinton just shy of history.
I know how disappointed you feel because I feel it too.
Days after the election, Trump came to Washington.
Take a shot.
And the president-elect began assembling an administration that, along with GOP majorities in the House and Senate, will shape American and global policy in 2017 and beyond. Up next, it's a busy time of year for an unusual company making Holy Mass possible in parishes all over the U.S. And we'll show you how Catholics in the Philippines are preparing for Christmas. Observe what is right, do what is just, for my salvation is about to come, my justice about to be revealed. That's from the book of Isaiah in today's readings at Mass. One man is working overtime this Christmas, and no, it's not St. Nick. As long as Mass is celebrated, Grant Orr will stay in business. He's made a list and checked it twice, and now it's time to deliver. Mark Irons reports.
The busiest day is Sunday, but many Catholic churches are open 7 days a week, and Mass is offered daily.
There's so much behind the scenes that goes on.
As more worshipers fill the pews, more supplies are ordered. Grant Orr owns a church supply company in Maryland. He tries to keep up with the demands of around 1,000 churches up and down the East Coast.
Chalices, tabernacles, the vestments, the crucifixes hanging in the church.
Consumable supplies go quickly.
These are whole wheat. These are white.
Like the hosts.
The order's almost double for Christmas time.
And candles.
We generally supply a great deal more during Christmas.
When possible, Grant makes deliveries himself.
Hey, Father Bava. Hi, Grant. How are you? Got some candles for you for Christmas here.
Okay. Father Dave Bava, pastor of Holy Redeemer Catholic Church in Washington, D.C., says the things Grant supplies are key to the liturgy.
The ambiance, or the environment in which we worship, hopefully leads people into a closer experience with the Lord. Visually, it helps them to realize the importance of what's going on in the sacramental experience.
Grant also receives special requests during the Christmas season.
We've got this crucifix. It was ordered by a church in North Carolina. We restored it. It'll be delivered back to the chapel for Christmas.
But one order is more important than all the rest.
The host is the center of the Catholic faith. We're the faith that truly believes that that becomes the body of Christ in the miracle of the Mass. Even though I am supplying bread at the time, just knowing what's going to turn into is pretty powerful.
In Beltsville, Maryland, Mark Irons, EWTN News Nightly.
Thanks, Mark. And finally tonight, the countdown to Christmas starts for Catholics in the Philippines. Mass at dawn this morning marked the beginning of a novena to prepare for the birth of Jesus. People woke up early in Manila to gather in front of a church at 4:30 a.m. A priest celebrated the Eucharist under Christmas lights and star lanterns.
These 9 days also signify our countdown to Christmas Day, and we await joyfully with great expectation God always being born in our hearts, being born in our lives.
The tradition of praying a novena before Christmas is centuries old. Special morning masses continue each morning until Christmas Eve. For all of us here at EWTN News Nightly, to all of you around the world, I'm Wyatt Goolsby. Have a great weekend, good night, and God bless.